Welcome to the Living History program of the American Physiological Society. Coming up on the program, a conversation with University of California, San Diego professor Shu Chien. He'll be interviewed by his longtime colleague, Gerd Schmidt-Schoenbein, also a professor in the bioengineering department of the UCSD Jacobs School of Engineering. First, though, some biographical background on Dr. Chien. He was born to be a scientist or a physician or an engineer, or all three. Shu Chien grew up in Shanghai and was a pre-med student at National Peking University, where his father was a professor of chemistry. In 1949, ahead of the Communist Revolution, the family left for Taipei. Chien attended medical school at National Taiwan University. After earning his M.D., he pursued a Ph.D. in physiology at Columbia University. It was at med school in Taiwan, however, that Chien had met his future wife, KC, who was 2 years behind him. After those 2 years apart, KC landed an internship at a hospital near Columbia, so she made the move to New York, where the two were married. Chien joined the Columbia faculty in 1959 after receiving his Ph.D., and he stayed there for 30 productive years. In 1967 alone, Chien co-authored 3 high-profile articles in the journal Science with Magnus Gregerson and others on the deformability and aggregation of red blood cells. In 1987, he took an extended sabbatical to set up Taiwan's Institute of Biomedical Sciences. The Institute's faculty and staff went from 0 to nearly 200 in just 18 months. Even before leaving for Taiwan, Chien had come to the attention of Y.C. Feng and Benjamin Zweifach, co-founders of the bioengineering program at UCSD. They were on the lookout for new faculty and especially for a potential successor to lead the program.
We just look over the whole country. I said, let's write down the number one person on your mind. He said, let's write it on the in a piece of paper. It turned out the same name.
That name, of course, Shu Chien. Shu and KC moved to San Diego. Their 2 daughters, Anne and May, stayed on the East Coast to pursue their careers in investment banking and ophthalmology. The year was 1988, and Chien became a professor of bioengineering and medicine at UCSD. Joining him was a cadre of Columbia researchers, including longtime collaborator Richard Scalak. They brought cellular and molecular approaches to bioengineering to complement the expertise of Feng and Zweifach, who were, after all, the fathers of, respectively, biomechanics and microcirculation. In the early 90s, Chien led a successful campus effort to create what is now the Whitaker Institute of Biomedical Engineering, an interdisciplinary center focused on tissue engineering science. Then in 1994, UCSD created a new department of bioengineering with Chien as founding chair. Ever since, UCSD has ranked among the top 2 or 3 bioengineering programs in the nation, with the number 1 PhD program, according to a National Research Council survey. In 1998, Chien began a successful effort to raise funds for a headquarters building for the department, entirely built with private funding. The Powell Vogt Bioengineering Hall opened in 2002. For all his success at building institutions, Chien also remained a prolific researcher. He is the author of more than 500 peer-reviewed journal articles and the editor of 11 books. In 2002, he was named a university professor, a distinction held by only 20 faculty members in the entire University of California system. He is also one of the few people elected to all 3 major U.S. academies, as well as Academia Sinica in Taiwan and the Chinese Academy of Sciences on the mainland. He is a past president of many leading U.S. organizations, including as the 63rd president of the American Physiological Society in 1990-91. More recently, he was president of the Biomedical Engineering Society from 2006 to 2008. Shu and KC returned to mainland China 46 years after fleeing. In 1995, they visited Chien's birthplace in Beijing and the family home in Shanghai. He gave lectures, accepted honorary degrees, and invited young Chinese researchers to the U.S. In 2006, Chen was named the inaugural holder of the Y.C. Feng Endowed Chair in Bioengineering in the Jacobs School, the chair named for the longtime mentor who brought Chen to San Diego in the first place. In 2008, Chen became a founding director of UCSD's new Institute of Engineering in Medicine, and in December 2009, Taiwan's president bestowed on Chen the Presidential Science Prize for Life Sciences, making Chen the first scientist living outside of Taiwan to be so honored. As he approaches his 80th birthday in 2011, Chen shows absolutely no sign of slowing down, not around his students nor his research colleagues, and certainly not around his 6 granddaughters, one a sophomore at Syracuse, another just admitted to Duke, and 4 more headed to college, perhaps to follow in their grandfather's or grandmother's footsteps. As we pick up the conversation, Professor Gerd Schmidt-Schonbein asks Shu Chien how his youth in China shaped his career, with Chen acknowledging that if not for his skipping his senior year of high school, he very nearly became a mathematician.
After the end of the World War II, my father took up the position of professor and chair of chemistry at Peking University in Beijing, and we moved back to Beijing when I was a junior year high school student. During that year, the government of the national Chinese government had a new ruling. That is, junior year high school students can apply for entrance examination for college. And that was very unusual, but I decided to take this opportunity to take the exam. And my interest has always been in mathematics. I always thought the numbers are fascinating. I can sort of see through them a lot of other things beyond it. So I was going to go into math, but when I went to make my choice of preference, I saw that in math you need to have analytical geometry as a major subject, and that was a subject taught in the senior year. So I did not have that, so I couldn't take the math, and I looked at all the other subjects, and I thought among all the other subjects, pre-med and medicine would be the one that I wanted because I was fascinated by medicine and how it can influence people's life to improve people's quality of life and their health. So important. So I decided to do that. I did not expect to pass the exam, but I did for some unknown reasons. I did pass the exam. So I went into medicine instead of mathematics. And I went to the pre-med program in the National Peking University. After studying there for a year and a half, the revolution came in China when the communists surrounded Beijing. And the nationalist government at that time decided to evacuate some of the professors from Beijing to the south of China. And we were given notice with very short lead time that we had to leave within half a day and can only carry some duffel bag. Each person carries a duffel bag. And we left just like that from Beijing to Shanghai, and then pretty soon Shanghai was in turmoil, and we went to Taiwan, where my father became provost of National Taiwan University, and I transferred to the medical school in Taiwan, where I finished my education. So actually I did not plan on becoming a medical student, but I did just because of the circumstance, and I'm very happy that that was the way it turned out. And in Taiwan, I finished the medical school. Then I had to decide what to do. I had 2 major choices. One is to continue with medicine, to be a doctor, and the other is to do biomedical research. I had interest in both of them. It was a hard decision.
Yeah. But you so ended up doing 1 year as a resident after you graduated from the National Taiwan University. But then you decided to make a huge step to go to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Columbia University in New York. That's a huge step. What made you go that way, Shu?
Well, actually, in Taiwan, the internship was required before graduation, so it was part of the total educational program. So I finished that. I enjoyed it very much. It's a rotating internship that you go through medicine, surgery, obstetric, gynecology, pediatric, psychiatry, and all of these major services. And I really enjoyed the contact with patients. So I was torn between, on the one hand, how to directly serve the patients to make them healthy and cure their disease. It's so rewarding. But on the other hand, I was also interested in innovation and pursuit of truth and new knowledge. So I was also interested in being a basic scientist. So it was a hard decision for me to make. But one thing I knew for sure, that is at that time, Taiwan, both in clinical medicine and basic research, were not very well developed, was not very well developed. So I needed to come to the United States. That was one thing I definitely knew I was going to do. But the question is whether going to medicine or to basic research. What I did was to apply for internship in the United States, several hospitals, and applied for several programs. I was interested in physiology among all the basic sciences, so applied to several physiology programs. I thought I would let fate decide for me. Whichever takes me, I'll go. But it turned out that I got accepted in all these places I applied, and I had to make my hard choice myself. After long thoughts and deliberations, I finally decided I want to go into basic research. Then I had several places. One area is neurophysiology I was interested in. The other is cardiovascular. These were the two major sites, disciplines I'm interested in physiology. And it happened that when I was deliberating, Dr. Magnus Gregerson, the chair of physiology of Columbia at that time, he was visiting Taiwan and met with a group of medical students, and I was one of them. When he asked everybody, what are you going to do? Of course, I told him what my plans were, but I couldn't decide. Oh, he said, that's easy. Just come to Columbia, to come to my lab. You will like it. You will have a great future. And that's how it was decided. It was, everything is by chance, but that's how it was.
So you never planned for that?
No, well, it was part of the plans, but never was such a definitive plan.
Right.
And what came out among all the possibilities, partially it seemed like it's predestinated, but as you said, it was not planned exactly that way, but I'm very pleased that that was the way it was. And
now, at Columbia University, you went into this new field of hemorheology. Tell us, what type of physiological problem did you want to solve there?
Yeah. Well, my thesis was on hemorrhage and shock. That was what Magnus Gregerson was interested in, and blood volume. And my thesis actually turned out to be the role of sympathetic nervous system in the compensatory mechanisms to hemorrhage. So you see, whatever you were interested in never goes away, because I was torn between neuro and cardiovascular physiology, and my thesis was the nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, in hemorrhage in the cardiovascular system. So it's still a combination. And after my graduation, I began to look deeper into the compensatory mechanisms to hemorrhage. And Magnus Gregerson just came back from a meeting in Sweden where Lars Gilling, a surgeon in Sweden, gave a talk on the role of blood viscosity, rheology, in shock. And he was very impressed. He told us about all that. And so he, Shunichi Usami, who was in the lab at that time, and we've been together for more than 30 years, and me, we decided to pursue this area to see how blood flow properties of blood can influence the compensatory mechanisms to hemorrhage. That's how we took up blood rheology. When we started, we knew nothing about it. I did not know what a shear stress or shear rate meant, but anyhow, we went into it, and we got deeper and deeper in the late 60s and early 70s. So that by the early 70s, I was referred to as a rheologist. I was really shocked. I said, 10 years ago, I knew nothing about it, but it was great fun.
Yeah.
We really discovered some of the very important elements of rheology, not only in physiological states, but in parts of physiological states in disease, such as acute myocardial infarction, major surgery, and many, many other diseases, like hematological diseases and so forth. So we really found that the flow properties of blood can play a major role in affecting the circulation, not just the vasculature itself. It's the interplay between the cardiovascular system and the blood.
And that, of course, has become really a mainstay of physiology today. You were, in fact, the director of the hemorrheology laboratory at Columbia University. But another characteristic of you, Shu, is that you quickly took advantage of the very large facility that was available, and you reached out to other disciplines.
In the late 70s, early 80s, I began to realize that molecular biology, which was a relatively new discipline, I mean, after all, the double helix was discovered only in the 1950s, and in the ensuing years, the molecular biology made tremendous progress. But physiologists at that time did not take advantage of these new developments. We were still mostly working on organ system levels, which are important, but this kind of molecular basis of function was not very much studied in physiology. So I wanted to make sure that this was introduced into physiology to be part of our technology approaches to solve important problems at organ system level. I decided to sit in on some of these workshops, some introduction courses, but I found that it was very hard for me to follow because the speakers usually took off so quickly. They were so have so much expertise, they think that the audience is the same, and we got lost in about 5 minutes or less. So I decided I really need to study this and then tell the physiologists what this is all about. So I sat in many classes, and I read and also get my laboratory to read chapters in Albert's book, and we try to understand ourselves. And in 1987, that's the centennial year of the American Physiological Society, I decided to have a symposium and workshop on molecular biology and physiology. And that was in Washington, D.C. And that was a very successful meeting. There must have been 500 or 600 people coming to that symposium.
Yeah.
And
this was in the pioneering times.
Pioneering time. And I decided to give the introduction myself because I want to speak in terms that the physiologists can understand, and not the molecular biologists think. They're too far ahead. And I really give the introduction with my knowledge gained from all these sources. I think the best way to learn is to teach. I mean, when I give that introduction, I really begin to understand more fully what the fundamental mechanisms are involved. And at that symposium, we have many distinguished scientists who agreed to speak. So after the introduction, they spoke. For example, Eric Kandel, who later went on to win the Nobel Prize, and many other outstanding scientists agreed to speak. And it was a very successful meeting. And then the workshop was done with industrial partners. They saw the tremendous potential of getting this new technology and their products into physiology, to open it up to so many people who were doing outstanding research but never used the molecular biology. So there was hands-on workshop. There were 4 or 5 rooms. Each one has a different technology, for example, Western blot and so forth. And what's most gratifying is that some years later, I met some of these people who attended the workshop. Some of them are chairs of physiology in different institutions. One of them later became the Physiological Society, APS president. And they told me how much they gained from these workshops.
Wonderful.
And as a result, they were able to start their own research using molecular biology to solve important physiological problems. That is the most gratifying part, that whatever things we do can help other people and make the whole field grow. So this is really great. And then a year later in Montreal, there was the APS 4 meeting. Now we don't have these 4 meetings, but in 1988, I organized another workshop. That one is more focused on cardiovascular system. So both of these workshops ended up with a monograph each. The first one is Molecular Biology and Physiology, published in 1988. The second one was Molecular Biology of the Cardiovascular System, published in 1990. So these books give sort of a summary of the state of the art at that time. In each book, I wrote an introductory chapter to let people gain the fundamental knowledge so they can read the later chapters written by the experts.
So in addition to this major effort to move physiology into engineering, you also distinguished yourself as an individual who reached out to the traditional fields of engineering. And at Columbia, you had a very strong interaction with engineering. Tell us about that event.
Well, it's my love for math that comes through here.
Yeah.
Because usually people say it's easier for engineers to learn biology because you just have to learn all the terms and some of the basic mechanisms, and it's not hard to get into. But for biologists to learn engineering, the difficult part is the basic tool, the math.
Right.
And I loved math, so it was no barrier for me. Even when I was a graduate student in physiology, I took some of the math and engineering courses, such as circuit analysis, such as viscoelasticity, control theory. My fellow students laughed at me and said, "Shu, why do you take these courses? They have nothing to do with physiology." But I just loved it. And in fact, I later teach a course called Control Theory in Physiological Systems, and that was very popular at Columbia. That was able to bring engineers and biomedical scientists, graduate students together. But my getting into engineering, the most important element is my collaboration with engineers. And I have many of valuable collaborators, but the first one I want to mention is Richard Scalak. He was professor of civil engineering, engineering mechanics at Columbia. It was through his interest in red blood cells and white blood cells, particularly when he spent a year of sabbatical leave at Sweden in Gothenburg with P.I. Brennemark, and he read a series of 3 papers that I published with Magnus Gregersen, Shunichi Usami, and other colleagues. 3 papers in Science. That was really quite a very unusual situation that we got 3 papers in a row. He was in Sweden. We're both Columbia faculty, but he read in Sweden and said, "Shu, I really like to get together with you to talk about how we can work together." And it so happened that I went to Gothenburg for a meeting that year before he came back. So we first met in Gothenburg, even though we're both at Columbia. So we had to go several thousand miles away to meet, and we charted out what we should do together. And that led to a most fruitful series of collaborations. We had probably 30 or 40 papers together over the years. And he really taught me how to use engineering approaches to solve biomedical problems. And I shared with him how biomedical problems can be collaborating with engineering. So it's really a 2-way collaboration. It's the most fruitful kind of collaboration I've ever had. Of course, fortunately, I have other outstanding engineers that I'll collaborate with, including yourself and Y.C. Fong, Shelley Weinbaum, and many, many others. So that is how I get into engineering. It's both my own interest and the fortunate events of being able to collaborate with my distinguished colleagues in engineering.
Yeah. Now I want to go back to this Taiwan-Columbia connection, because in 1987 to 1988 you decided to go back for 1 year as the director of the new Institute of Biomedical Sciences of the Academia Sinica in Taipei. What did you hope to achieve at that time?
Well, just like in science, you always go back to your original roots. Like I mentioned, I was interested in math, I went into engineering. The same is true with life. Wherever you gain your initial roots, you never forget.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in China and later get my medical education in Taiwan, I felt that I really want to contribute further to the development of sciences in my homeland. So in the 1980s, a group of members of Academia Sinica, led by the late Dr. Paul Yu of Rochester, we together planned a new institute called Institute of Biomedical Sciences, because in the Academia Sinica, which is like our national academies, but it has intramural program, and the intramural program did not have anything with biomedical sciences. It has botany, zoology, and so forth, and the others are humanities and natural sciences. There were more than 10 institutes. So we decided to propose a new institute called Institute of Biomedical Sciences. I was one of the 5 members planning committee in the United States. Okay. And when the chips are down, we had to start. Nobody else could go. And I just decided I would go. I mean, I wanted to contribute to the development of sciences in Taiwan, in this case, biomedical sciences. So I went in January 1987 and was there for a year and a half. In between, I go back and forth. I was still at Columbia, and I was still teaching physiology. I must have traveled 8 times back and forth during the year and a half. And in the summer of 1987, I decided to get our colleagues at Columbia Physiology to go there to introduce the modern techniques and the concepts in physiology, particularly microcirculation and biophysical approaches to our colleagues in Taiwan. And you were one of the colleagues who kindly came with me, and so was Kurt Lipowski and many others. And we were able to launch a series of courses and workshops, and then I also synergized different groups, not only cardiovascular, but also cancer and infectious disease, epidemiology, and cell biology. So we got all of these going, and now that was more than 20 years ago. Today, this Institute of Biomedical Sciences, called IBMS, is one of the leading institutions in Taiwan. You and I can be very proud of what we contributed to that, and this is really great. It's marvelous to see how what you do can give back to the place you came from. And it's great to be able to educate, to train these young scientists, medical students, fellows, and young faculty, and so forth. It was really terrific.
And then at the end of that period, in fact the same year, you decided now to move to UC San Diego.
That's right. Yes, actually Dr. Y.C. Feng and Dr. Ben Zweifach were the leaders of the program, bioengineering program at UCSD at that time. They wanted to recruit me to San Diego. And I was very interested in that because they were great leaders, and the other members, including you, had just gone back to San Diego. You and the other members were an outstanding group of bioengineering faculty, just probably one of the best in the country. And it would be such a great joy to be a part of that team. But on the other hand, it's very difficult for me to leave Columbia. I had been there for nearly 30 years, from graduate student days till faculty, and built up a group of some 30 people, and with close collaboration with, I mentioned Dick Skalak and others in engineering, but also with clinical medicine. I had the close collaboration with medicine, surgery, anesthesiology, neurosurgery, and so forth. It was just a marvelous group of people. It's very hard for me to leave. In addition, my wife, Casey, was a physician working in the city of New York, and it's hard for her to move because she went to left New York and went to California, she would have to take a new license examination some 40 years after college, after graduation. And that was very hard. So for all these reasons, I was not able to give a clear answer. And one of the things I did say was that I have this great collaboration with Dick Skalak. I cannot leave him, and we have to work together. So the answer to me was that we will recruit Dick Skalak as well, so that we wind up to be a package, and plus several other colleagues like Amy Song, Paul Song, and Usami, and so forth. They all came together, as well as my longtime technical assistant, Jerry Norwich. We all were recruited at the same time. One early morning, like 5 a.m., I got a phone call, and I'm half asleep. I picked up the phone. On the other side of the line was Drs. Feng and Zweifach. They said, "Shu, are you going to come or not?" I said, "I just want to get them off the phone." I said, "Yes, I'm coming." So that's how it came about. I think that's my best decision made when I was half asleep. So that's the story how I came to San Diego. And I don't regret that at all, even though I love Columbia still. But I think my move to San Diego was at the right time. It was a good decision.
And I think the University of California doesn't know how lucky it is that you are here at this university. Shu, you have been elected many times in your life the Teacher of the Year. You have a very special touch to students. Can you tell us how you gain their trust and how they gain confidence in your presence? What's your secret, Shu?
Thank you very much, Garrett. I don't have any particular secret. You have won the Best Teacher of the Year award many times yourself, and there are other colleagues who do great things with teaching. But I think one thing I do feel is I care about teaching. I think that's one of our most important tasks as a professor, that is to teach and train the next generation of scientists, whether it's engineers or basic scientists. We need to, or medical students or dental students, we want to share with them our own knowledge and make them learn and grow. And the first prerequisite is that they have to be interested in that. So what we need to do is to make sure we get them engaged. They're interested in sort of active learning. If we just feed them the material, it's not going to get very far. But if they are interested in and participate actively in the learning process, then we can go very far. And I always treat the students as partners. I mean, we are together for the common purpose of making them grow and learn to be better scientists than we are, I mean, in the next generation. So it's always moving forward. So with that kind of thinking in mind, you automatically become devoted to that, and it comes through as a partnership.
Yeah.
And I think that's what students can feel. I think we all like that. Whatever we think in our mind comes right through. Doesn't matter what you say, it's what you think that really gets projected. And I think the students, if they have confidence, they have trust, it's because they feel they can trust the person that they see and deal with and work with. So I think it's from the heart. I always say it's the most important thing. It's in your mind, in your heart. If it's there, then it will come out. If it's not there, you try to force it, it will not get anywhere. So I really love teaching. I love to work with students. I just enjoy so much when I see them grow. Like some of my students who are doing much better than I am. I just think that's the greatest thing, the greatest achievement.
Shu, let me go to another side of your professional life. You have been president of many societies. I already mentioned the American Physiological Society. You were president of the Microcircular Society. Recently, you were president of the Biomedical Engineering Society. You also are probably the unique in the country that you were the president of the Federation of American Biologists and Federation of American Society of Experimental Biology, and you were president of American Institute of Medical Biological Engineering, two large organizations that represent our field in Washington. What makes you interested in this public service and this tremendous devotion of time to these particular aspects of our profession?
Well, like in any other profession or any kind of group, I think there's the big self and the small self. For me, it's only the small self, but there's a big self. There's these associations that work for thousands of people, like the American Physiological Society, around 10,000 members, or FASEB has now 20-some member societies with probably more than 80,000 members. We'd like to be able to contribute to the growth and development and welfare of our fellow members in these disciplines. So I think all of us have to do service to devote ourselves for the good of the big self rather than just confining to the small self. And I think the enjoyment there is tremendous, and to be able to do any kind of service. I was very fortunate that I was given the opportunity to do these kinds of jobs, and I really enjoy doing that. I think the amount of things one can do is so immense, actually beyond what our own recognition. I never realized I could do all these things, but when it came up, somehow I managed to do that. You have the one important thing is to manage your time so that you can deal with multiple demands. And I think by working with these societies, organizations, it helped me in other ways, even in my own research. I think it's a two-way street, never just one simple direction. And it was very fortunate, actually, for me. You mentioned these two big organizations, FASEB and AIMBE, AIMBE. Both of these, I stepped into the president's position just at the right time for some reason, by chance maybe. For the FASEB, when I became the president, that was when FASEB was in a very difficult situation. We had a retreat a couple of years before I took over the presidency. I participated in that retreat in Williamsburg to address how FASEB can deal with its current situation. It's almost going to dissolve with only 6 societies, and very quickly looks like a couple of them may pull out, so there'll be no more FASEB. And we're able to work together to show everybody there's this big self. The important thing is for all of us to work together for the public good. So the public policy was adapted as the major policy for FASEB instead of all the other things, such as meeting and so other things. They're secondary. The most important thing is public policy. And I was able to start this consensus conference, start a public affairs office in FASEB. So all of these really focus on the public policy. And today we have 20-some member societies instead of 6, and we have 80,000 members instead of 20 or 30,000. And our voice on the Hill is so strong that the Congress and the executive branch of the government, they listen to FASEB, or they seek advice from FASEB about various kinds of science policy matters. So I think this is really great. That, of course, this is due to the tremendous work by a large number of people, the presidents of all these years in between. They all, and the council and everyone contributed to that. Now for AIMBE, I took over the president at a time when there was some moves about establishing a national institute related to bioengineering at the NIH. And there was a lot of debate even among the Biomedical Engineering Society members as to whether this is a good thing for us or not. And I was able to generate a consensus to say this is something we should do, to have a home base, a representation in the NIH. And at that time, the imaging community, the radiologists, were also trying to get an institute of their own, but they saw that they couldn't do it by themselves, and bioengineering couldn't do it by ourselves. So we got together, and I was very involved in the establishment of this National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering. Acronym is NIBIB. And this has been now more than 6 years in existence and has benefited the field very much. So as I said, I was in the right place at the right time. It's by chance, probably, but I was ready to do it, as there was the saying, chances for the prepared mind. So I was prepared for it, and I did it. Of course, APS, I already mentioned how important it is to me, and what I try to do to contribute to the society and to its members. In fact, the second book I mentioned, The Molecular Biology in the Cardiovascular System, I just took a look at it this morning. On the cover, and on the first page after the cover, it says, dedicated to the American Physiological Society and its members. So that's how I felt about that, about the society.
Right. You know, with this as a background and you being so busy, there, on the other side, I have to look at you and I see your creative side. You have made many important and very creative contributions. If I have to do this, I run out of steam. Shu, where do you get your inspiration? Where do you recharge your batteries in order to become a creative individual again when you're so busy with so many issues?
Well, this is a good question. I think one of the things is that even though when I'm very busy with all these things, I never looked upon them as a chore or something that I sort of do it just for the sake of doing it. But I always enjoy everything that I do, whether it's for the professional organization, whether it's for the university, the department, or my research work by my colleagues and graduate students and so forth. Everything is enjoyable to me. It's fun. And therefore, I don't think I ever discharge my battery. I mean, I use it, yes, I do. I mean, I do need rest and recreation and so forth, and keep healthy and everything like that. But I think the most important thing, perhaps, now that you asked the question, perhaps is to always enjoy what I'm doing. For example, I always told my students that when I make those PowerPoint slides for my presentation, that's my recreation. It's like drawing paintings by artists. It's enjoyable. It's not a, oh gosh, I have to make these slides for that talk. No, it's enjoyable. How I can make it so that the people who listen to my talk will get the most out of it. How do I stand on the side of the audience and see what kind of presentation will make it better? And so everything is always like that. It's enjoyable. I think that may be the most important thing. So throughout my life, I never thought about, boy, do I need a vacation? I mean, when I hear people say that, I just cannot relate to that, because I can go on vacation, that's great, that's great, but I don't take too many, the problem is. But there's not such a feeling of I need to recharge. I mean, I just feel it's always discharging, charging is equilibrium. It's a steady state, sort of dynamic equilibrium.
You are one of the unique individuals in the history of science. You're a member of all three academies of United States National Academies. You're a member of the National Academy of Arts and Sciences. You're a member of the Academia Sinica. You're a member of the Chinese National Academies, just to name some. Shu, what in your mind is your greatest contribution?
Well, I really feel very humbled by all these recognitions. I don't think I really have done enough to deserve all of these. So I can only say I'm very grateful for having these honors and awards. Well, it came first in medicine, the Institute of Medicine, then followed by National Academy of Engineering, then National Academy of Sciences. Of the three national academies you mentioned, I think of the three, well, they are equally prominent. I mean, they're very prestigious and very humbled by these recognitions. But I think for me, probably the most difficult one for me to even to think of is National Academy of Engineering, because I never had any formal training in engineering. I do not have a degree in engineering. My engineering is all self-taught and taught by my colleagues, as I mentioned before. And medicine, I did go to medical school. I work on medical problems. And for science, I certainly having a physiologist, since my graduate student days. So these two well, even though I feel maybe I don't deserve it, but at least there's a way to rationalize that I deserve it. Engineering, I really feel that is way out of my expectation. I am particularly humbled by that, and I feel very privileged. It's really the one that I probably treasure even more. It's not because it is a more important organization, certainly not. They're all equally important. But for me, the most unexpected one is engineering.
Right.
And even more than that, the National Academy of Engineering elected every year one engineer to receive the Founders Award, who has made the most contribution to engineering. That's not just bioengineering, it's mechanical, chemical, electrical, civil, all of these engineering fields. And I was selected to be the Founders awardee, and that was really totally unexpected, very, very humbling to me. That's the one I really, of all the awards, I think that was, I mean, of course, the awards I received from the APS are very treasured, like the Ray Dax Award, Walter Buchanan Lectureship, and these are very, very precious. But in terms of the unlikelihood, I think that one really stands out to me.
Now, on the other side, Shu, I'm sure you must have some aspects in your life that you regret. But what I'd like you to talk about is what advice would you give to a student to avoid such a situation?
Well, I think whether you have regret or not depends on how you look at it. I mean, I could sit here and say, oh, I regret that I did not go into math. Okay. I regret that I did not go into clinical medicine. I might have cured so many people, you know, helped their health. Or math, maybe I can really use my intrinsic sort of capability related to math and to do something, you know, very original, different. But I never think that way. You see, whatever I do, I just say, this is it. I've made a choice. I will stay with it. I do the best I can, and I don't look back. So I just enjoy what I'm doing. I'm very grateful that I've been trained in physiology and then being able to get into bioengineering. And there could be many things that one would regret, one thing here, one there. Because at bifurcation, I have to make so many choices. All of us do. We always have bifurcation, and you always have to make one choice and let go with the others. But whatever choice I make, I say that's it, and I do the best I can. So I never have regrets. Now, perhaps what I should say is about failure. I mean, we all have failures. The question is how to deal with failures. For example, we have grant applications that don't get funded. We have papers submitted, get rejected. I really look at it in a positive way. All of these, I really, instead of saying, these reviewers, they don't know what they're talking about, I say, yeah, let's see what did they tell me. And then I would make revisions and continue to do it. Always look at it positively. I just have this way of looking everything in a positive way. That's what I want to share with the young colleagues. There are two ways to look at, like the cup, glass is half full or half empty. To me, it's always half full. It's never half empty, and that's very important. I think I learned this. The earliest time I learned it was in college when I played the basketball. We had a team in Taiwan, and in the medical school, I was on the team for the medical school. Playing with the other colleges, we always, well, not always, we lost most of the time. Like, we won 30% of the time. Lost to engineering, lost to business and literatures and science colleges. But I think that was the best lesson I learned, how to take defeat and how to work with a team. See, when the team lost, so we get together to say, why do we lose? How did we lose? What should we do to regroup ourselves and meet the next challenge? I mean, that's the kind of thinking I use throughout my life, whether for grant application, for any other joint research, or working for societies, and all of these is the teamwork. It's not just how to celebrate your victory, but how to deal with defeat also. And I think that's what I will share with my young colleagues.
Shu, how did you meet your wife, Casey? And how did she influence your career in physiology?
Well, that's the subject I like to talk about most. We met each other at National Taiwan University Medical School. Shu was, we're at the same age, but because I skipped the 2 classes along the way, including the one that I mentioned for college entrance, and so I was 2 years ahead, but we got to know each other in school, and then we finally get married in New York City, actually, after I went to Columbia, and subsequently she went to New York to do her internship and residency and in New York City. So we married actually in 1957. Now it's 52 years. It's really the most wonderful thing that has happened to me, and because KC has been just so loving and caring and wonderful to me. You asked about the inspiration. I think part of the inspiration is from her. Not that she told me what is the next scientific project you should do, but just the inspiration in general, giving me this positive way of looking at things. And I've never the slightest doubt that she's not 100% or maybe 1,000% for me. It's just unbelievable. Every time I get the awards, I always say that I really should share this with Casey. She deserves half of it. Then once a friend of mine told me, a close friend, he said, she deserves more than 50% of it. I said, I heartily agree. And she's just wonderful.
Yes. So if you look back now, 50 years, you just mentioned that. Physiology in the last 50 years has now very substantially changed. Tell us, how do you view it in the future? What are we to be expecting?
Yeah. Physiology used to be at the center stage of all biomedical sciences. Actually, there was no other branches other than physiology. Biochemistry, pharmacology, all of these sort of branched off from physiology. Even the societies, originally was American Physiological Society, then we have the pharmacology, biochemistry, nutrition, pathology, all of the others. So physiology used to be in the center, and if you look at Nobel Prize, it's called physiology or medicine. So that means clinically or medicine. That word medicine includes pediatrics, surgery, everything. And the word physiology includes all of the basic sciences. So it's physiology or medicine, basic science or clinical medicine. But over the years, particularly since the discovery of the double helix and the surge of biochemistry, and physiology at one time was in a state of, actually I used the word used in an article by our long-range planning committee in the early 1990s. It's called the malaise. Physiology was, there was the article in the title of that article by the long-range planning committee about the current status of physiology. And I think that was really true at that time, and many physiology departments got dissolved or changed into other names and so forth. But I felt that since we have incorporated all the modern technologies that are available for us to make our scientific inquiry into the functions of the living organisms, human body and other kind of living organisms, we began to gain more and more momentum to make physiology once again taking the center stage. Actually, in 1996, I was the chair of the long-range planning committee of the American Physiological Society, and my colleagues in the committee and I, we wrote an editorial published in the Physiologist in 1996, and the title is "The Sun Breaks Through the Clouds." That's a takeoff on Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. He said, the sun breaks through the darkest clouds. So he said, the sun breaks through the clouds. The future is bright for physiology. So we turn it around and look at positively. That's the only way I look at things. I never know how to look at malaise for a discipline. I only know the future is bright. And we have reasons for that, just because we have now incorporated all the modern approaches, not only molecular biology nowadays, like nanotechnology, system biology.
Yeah.
These are marvelous new developments. And physiology is able to absorb all of these. We still keep on our basic inquiry of the basic mechanisms of function of the body, particularly human body, and what goes wrong in disease, the pathophysiology of that. That's our fundamental core value. But we must continuously incorporate all of these new approaches, so we're always up to date at the frontier. I think today there is a tendency for journals, such as Circulation Research and many other journals, they ask for in vivo data. Now you have shown this molecule is doing these great things by in vitro experiments. How about in vivo? That's inside the, at least the animal body, but ultimately in human bodies. What do these findings in molecular biology mean? So I think physiology is once again going to take the center stage. We must capitalize on that and not let that slip by. We have to seize the opportunity and use all of these tools that are available today to pursue our knowledge, pursue our core value, to understand the fundamental mechanisms controlling various kinds of physiological functions in health and physiological derangements in disease. So if we can do that, and we are doing that, if you look at the program of APS program, I mean, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
All of these new things, as well as including bioengineering and other kinds of disciplines approaches. So I think the future is indeed bright. I can reinforce what we said in 1996 with even more conviction.
On that note, Shu, I want to thank you on behalf of the American Physiological Society for this wonderful insight that you have given to us. We are full of admiration for all the contributions that you have made to physiology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garrett, for giving me this opportunity. And I want to thank the American Physiological Society once again. Thank you all very, very much.